this song, people sing it around Christmas time. It's an old Christmas song, right? People ever heard Good King Wenceslas, right? If you haven't, you've probably heard the tune. Like, you've probably been in a store around holiday time and you've probably heard this song. But I will find a non-copyrighted version of it and I will just put it on for you right now. Because it's a very famous Christmas carol, right? It's very old, but there's more to it than you would realize. I'm gonna find like a version that won't get my stream shut down, right? That's my goal here. So yeah, let's find a version that looks very amateurish, like a high school choir or something that's not going to get me a copyright strike here. All right, I found a high school choir from Alhambra, California performing it. That will not get me a copyright strike. So got that, YouTube. Not using the professional version that would make my audience much happier. I'm using a high school version I just randomly found. It's not a high school choir. These are adults. Don't worry, right? We're not violating the privacy of any children here. They're not singing. This is a bell choir. Oh, goodness gracious. There's no lyrics. Okay, now got to find another one. Can't do the Alhambra, California one. That doesn't work. Goodness gracious. Oh, my goodness. I'm just trying to find you a choir. I'll type Good King Wenceslas choir. I'll do that. I'll do a choir version. One that won't be copyrighted that way, right? I'll try to find you some amateurish choir performing it, right? It's a Christmas carol. It's one of the more obscure Christmas carols, but it's not as famous as the ones you always hear, but it's a good one, right? It's a good one. Hold on. All right. This is a choir from Kansas City, Missouri, performing Good King Wenceslas. So again, if that Kansas City choir wants to sue me, or if I get a copyright infringement for this, hold on. If I get a copyright infringement for this, I'll be utterly shocked. But you never know. These things are very, very weird. So we're gonna play Good King Wenceslas, right? Here. And so you know what I'm talking about. Because if you don't know what I'm talking about, this won't make any sense, what I'm about to tell you, because it's actually kind of it's actually quite relevant. You would think this is just a Christmas song. This is just one of those like holiday tunes that people always hear. But it's actually got a lot to do with what we talk about on our streams here. So I just thought I'd share that with all of you. So here we go. I'm queuing it up, right? Oh, goodness gracious. All right, I'm queuing it up. Queuing up Good King Wenceslas, a version that will not cause my stream to be shut down by copyright law. All right. Here we go. From Kansas City, Missouri. Now, that is a very famous, popular Christmas song that people like. I saw, I was looking in the chat here, like Simon, he said, I didn't even know that this song was the song you meant, sang it in high school choir. Yeah, you just hear it and you don't think about it, right? You don't think that there's any political meaning in that song, but it's actually very, very relevant to what we talk about on here. It's actually highly relevant. Every time you hear that song, you should think of socialism or Bonapartism, because that's what the song is about. It's about Bonapartism. This song is about a Bonapartist. Wenceslas was not a king. He was a duke, right? And he was given the title of king after he died because he was martyred for Christendom, for Christianity. He lived in the 900s in Bohemia. That's like now known as Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic or Slovakia. He lived there, and there was a big divide among the aristocracy at the time. Half of them were Christian, and half of them were pagan. And the pagan aristocrats and dukes were fighting against the Christian dukes, and they were battling each other. And it was a struggle within the ruling class. The aristocracy of Middle Ages Bohemia were battling each other, trying to get the peasants to join their side against the other aristocrats. The Christian aristocrats battled the pagan aristocrats. And they were fighting against each other. And Wenceslas, the Duke of Bohemia, he was a Christian, and his rivals were the pagans. And so Wenceslas figured out that in order to get all the poor people on his side, he should start doing really nice things for poor people in order to get them to support Christianity and to support him against the pagans. So, in order to rally the peasantry to be on his side against the pagans, he started doing really kind things, like feeding poor people, like going up to random poor people and giving them gifts. And he became known as the friend of the poor. He was just this charitable person who went around doing kind things for the peasantry because of the fact that he wanted them on his side, and he wanted them against the rival faction of the ruling class. So basically, Wenceslas, he was kind of a mini Julius Caesar, or maybe even a mini Roosevelt, if you want to put it that way. He was a mini Julius Caesar or a mini Roosevelt. He was a member of the ruling class who was threatened by other members of the ruling class, and so he entered an alliance with the peasantry, with another class, in order to defeat and stabilize and win out among his own class, right? So what Roosevelt did. Roosevelt was a member of the capitalist class, but he was being threatened with a fascist coup by the other members of his class, so he entered an alliance with the working class. Julius Caesar, he was a member of the military aristocracy of Rome, but he entered an alliance with the proletariat so he could defeat other members of the aristocracy of Rome. This is called Bonapartism, and it's essential to understanding how revolutions happen, because every revolution in history has started out as a fight within the ruling class, and it brings the working class into motion. And soon the working class becomes aware of its own strength and eventually becomes, is able to overthrow all of the capitalists. But part of the process of the working class awakening is fighting among the ruling class amid chaos. That's why Lenin, he writes about how when there's the crisis, when a revolutionary situation happens, is when even members of the ruling class feel that the old way of ruling is no longer possible, right? And that when a capitalist crisis enters, you have divisions in the ruling class, and this gives rise to Bonapartist struggles within the ruling class. You get your Roosevelts, you get your Hitlers, you get your Kerenskys, you get your Kornilovs, and that maneuvering in these alliances leads to the proletariat taking power. That when Hugo Chavez first got elected, he was a Bonapartist. He was a military member of the military class. He was like a brass military guy in Venezuela, but he entered an alliance with the working class. And that alliance, and I'll get to that, Lionel, and that alliance he entered eventually got Venezuela on the road to socialism. So good King Wenceslas, or Duke of Wenceslas, he was given the title of king after he died. He entered an alliance with the peasantry in order to win the peasantry to be his allies against the pagans, right? And actually, the story goes, right, if you read that the time I'm trying to read, became known for his good deeds. This is what was written about him. It says, "But his deeds I think you know better than I could tell you. For as I read in his passion, no one doubts that rising every night from his noble bed, with bare feet and only one chamberlain, he went around to God's churches and gave alms generously to widows and orphans and to those in prison and those afflicted by every difficulty, so much so that he was considered not a prince, but a father to all the wretched." That's heavy, isn't it? Right? So this guy is rising from his bed every night with bare feet and only one servant, and he's going around to churches to give help and charity and kindness to widows and orphans and people in prison and people with difficulty, so much so that he's considered not even to be the king or the prince or whatever, but he's the father of all the wretched, right? This is a very kind man. This is how Americans viewed Roosevelt, right? Like he was the father of the country, right? That, this is how Americans viewed this is how Americans viewed Lincoln, right? He was old Abe Lincoln who came up from the wilderness, right? And he was like the father of the country who's caring for the downtrodden and all of this. And of course, we know, why is he doing this? Is he doing it just out of the goodness of his heart? Well, we'd like to believe that. But in reality, he's doing it because there's a struggle within the ruling class. And the other nobles want to kill him. The pagan nobles want to overthrow him because they don't like him because he's a Christian. So he's trying to recruit all the peasants to be Christians on his side. And so to do it, he's going around to the churches and giving people nice things and being, he's like a Santa Claus kind of figure. He's the father of the poor and the wretched. So then what happened to Wenceslas? Right? The pagan nobles couldn't stand this guy because he was building a class collaborationist alliance. He was building up a Bonapartist alliance against them. And Christianity was becoming very popular in Bohemia, and those pagans were losing out. So what did the pagans do? They conspired against him, and they formed a conspiracy against him, and they assassinated him. And in September of 935, a group of nobles allied with Wenceslas' younger brother plotted to kill him. After Boleslav invited Wenceslas to his celebration of the saints of the Cosmos and Darmia, 3 of Boleslav's companions fell on the Duke and stabbed him to death. And as the Duke fell ill, Boleslav ran through him with a lance. Jesus Christ. They didn't just kill him. They really killed him. Holy shit, right? 3 guys jumped on him and stabbed him, and then somebody else took a lance that's like a long spear and ran it through him. Like, they killed him dead, as they say. Holy shit, they killed King Wenceslas, right? According to Cosmos of Prague, in the early 12th century, one of Boleslav's sons was born on the day of Wenceslas's death, and because of this ominous circumstance of his birth, the infant was named Strachvus, which means dreadful feast. That sucks. So the day your grandfather gets assassinated is the day you're born. And so your name for your whole life is Dreadful Feast. That sucks. That poor guy. Anyway, Wenceslas was killed, and he was considered to be a martyr for Christianity because he was, trying to convert all the peasants to become Christians. And because of that, the pagan nobles all conspired against him and stabbed him to death. And so he's Saint Wenceslas, right? He was given sainthood after his death. And to be a saint, you have to do a miracle, right? So the lyrics to Good King Wenceslas that you just heard, the lyrics describe like he went to go help some poor person and he didn't leave any tracks in the snow. So that was his miracle. It's kind of a lame miracle, right? He didn't turn water into wine. He didn't bring anybody back from the dead, but he went to go help somebody and walked through the snow, and then there were no tracks. So that somehow was a miracle. So that was how he got to be a saint. That was Good King Wenceslas. But anyhow, The song, Good King Wenceslas, that Christmas carol you just heard, is very political because it's about a Bonapartist. And actually, you may not have been able to hear the lyrics, right? But the last line, the last stanza of the last verse of the song goes like this: "Therefore, Christian men be sure, wealth or rank possessing, ye who will now bless the poor, shall yourselves find blessing." Right? So it's basically saying that that Christians have an obligation to help the downtrodden, to help the hungry, to help those in need. So it's a Christian, I would argue it's a Christian socialistic Christmas carol. So the next time you hear the song Good King Wenceslas, right? Think about socialism. Think about Bonapartism and struggles within the ruling class, because that's basically what the song is about, right? It's basically it's a song about a struggle within the ruling class. It's a song about an aristocrat who entered a strategic alliance with the peasantry. That's what it's about. So I just wanted to share that all with you, because we need to find ways to relate to people, right? Because if we can tell this story, right? Imagine that you're a teacher, right? And you told this story to your students, right? Then for the rest of their life, every time they hear bum 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 bum, they're going to think about socialism. And that's beautiful, right? And it's very relatable, right? People may not be ready to like Stalin. They might not be ready to like Mao, but they can like Saint Wenceslas, right? Because everyone likes him. They sing his song at Christmas time. He looks like Santa Claus. He's this mythological, he's a figure that we can all like. But if you actually look into the story, if you're a Marxist, and if you're someone who understands dialectical and historical materialism and class struggle, it's a very important story, right? It's a great story. So these are the kind of stories that we should really go looking for, right? When we can have stories like this, right? By teaching people the story of Saint Wenceslas and who he was, and the struggle within the ruling class. All of this is teaching people the science of revolution. This is teaching people Marxism in a way that they can understand it. And it shows that this stuff, did the people who wrote that carol, do you think that they were Marxists? Of course not. Do you think that the person who wrote this, no, these are things that everyone can relate to, because these are the objective laws of history. Classes enter struggles. Divisions in the ruling class lead to alliances with other classes, right? That the will of oppressed classes is often asserted because of divisions within the ruling class. These are of the objective laws of history. This goes back to the assassination of Julius Caesar. This goes back to the execution of Socrates. These things happen, right? And this is something that we can understand, and we can teach people scientific Marxism by teaching them about their favorite Christmas carol.